So let me move on to our next panel, expanding the horizons of market risk and surveillance. This is what happens when you're not comfortable with the technology. So we have, so this is where we are going to deep dive before police comes, what we're going to do, and when should the police come. It's all about the surveillance technology. So the panel will be moderated by none other than Dr. V.R. Narasimhan, Dean and Professor of Practice at NISM. Welcome, sir, who is there with us. Thank you very much for helping us out organize this event. Doctor has 40 years of work experience in financial and capital market in India. He has worked with SEBI, National Security Depository Limited. He has worked with Kotak Bank and NSE. He has played a pivotal role in his previous stint, where he's worked with many market innovations, like whether it is a DMAT, a concept among all issuers and investors in the country, or developing new products and services like National Skills Registry for NASSCOM, biometric best investor registration system, and many more. While working with Kotak Mahindra Bank, he has played multiple roles, including setting up Kotak Mahindra's pension fund company, setting up commodity derivative exchange, as well as a group head for capital market compliance. So he knows this subject very well. He has served NSE as a chief regulatory officer from 2013 to 2018. He's a postgraduate in commerce and MBA finance and PhD, and a member of Institute of Company Secretaries of India. Welcome, sir. Now for the panel, we have Mr. Sunil Kadam, who is a registrar of NISM. Mr. Kadam has joined SEBI in 1996, and during his tenure in SEBI, he has worked with various departments in SEBI and hence handled work relating to the surveillance and investigations, corporate finance, forensic accounting, corporate governance, business responsibility risk reports, and various other sections. I would not take much time to, I would love to hear them more than me talking here. He's also a member of various committees on the SEBI and on disclosure and accounting standards and auditing and assurance standards. He has also represented SEBI in various Asian Roundtable and conferences. He holds a degree of Master of Business Administration from University of Pune. The next panel member we have, so welcome Sunil sir. The next panel member we have is Ranganathan Atreya, who is a member of senior management team and key management person and company secretary in ICICI Bank. Over 31 years of experience in creating winning team and organization across the banking and financial sectors. He has worked directly with some visionary and legendary leaders in Indian industry at a board level for over 3 decades across manufacturing and finance with the TVS Group, with banking, which is ICICI Bank, IDBI, and Karnataka Bank, and mutual fund houses like ICICI Prudential Asset Management. His experience includes in-depth cross-border private banking compliance coverage, managing investment into India through appropriate structures in line with SEBI and FPI regulations, significant group compliance expertise in interfacing with Ministry of Corporate Affairs, SEBI, IRDA, RBI, stock exchanges, depositories. He has a deep understanding of capital markets and relevant regulations. Welcome, sir. The next panelist that I have is Mr. Michael O'Brien, who is a VP of Product Management, NASDAQ, Sydney. Michael is the head of Product Management of NASDAQ, Risk and Surveillance Solutions. He has closely worked with NASDAQ Trade Surveillance from the initial launch of services in 2004, which is currently known as SMARTS, to its current state as world's leading provider of trade surveillance technology for the buy-side and sell-side participant, and is responsible for NASDAQ's ongoing commitment to drive the innovation in compliance and surveillance technology. As a widely recognized expert in surveillance best practices, regulation and compliance technology, Michael is frequently featured speaker at leading financial industry conference worldwide. Now I hand over the charge to Dr. Narasimhan to take this further. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sheetal, for the introductions. We have a very interesting panel today evening to discuss about expanding horizon of risks and surveillance. I have a governance professional, Mr. Ranganath. I have a market person, Mr. Michael, and I have got a regulator in Mr. Sunil Kadam. What I will do is I will say a few words to set the stage, and request the panelists to give their initial remarks. After that, we'll have some questions to the participants, or I may ask questions if I don't have adequate questions from the participants. As you all can understand and appreciate, governance challenges in companies are only growing in complexity. Good governance demands total transparency to the shareholders. Only exception is issues of commercial confidentiality, reduce the information asymmetry between management and the board, which is always there. Information asymmetry has to be reduced, and adherence to corporate governance standards, which is a high level ask, and a transactional level compliances, which is a very low level ask in terms of granularity. So therefore, the role of governance of a professional is now very complicated. Granular transaction level requirements to board level governance standards have to be combined, and he has to handle. It's now slowly, he has to use technology to see that he's able to handle all these complexities using appropriate technological tools. You talk about integration of management systems with related to transactions, conflict of interest, whatever. I'm sure that Mr. Ranganath Atreya will reflect on these issues and challenges in handling governance functions using technology. On the other side, markets are definitely getting truly integrated. When I say integrate, I'm not talking about geographical integration or integration alone. You will see in the same market a household investor who comes with a few hundred rupees for his few thousands of rupees for his investments, a proprietary trader indulging in HFT and algo trade, institutional investor working for in fiduciary capacity, hedge funds would like to make money out of the growing market situations, pension funds would like to work for the welfare of their pensioners. So this is integrated, and the same marketplace has to give returns to all these category of investors. How do we make this marketplace safe and secure? The intensity of trades, volume of trade, products offered trading, interconnections among them carry different levels of risks. The whole challenge is to see that there is no operational, financial, or structural risk, and everybody takes benefit of the marketplace as it goes on. We have brokers, we have stock exchanges, and we have got different category of investors. All of them look forward to technology to provide solutions to see that their life in the market is comfortable. I'm sure that my panelists will speak about this. Going forward, the gone are the days when market manipulation is required to be in a single proximity with one another. When I joined SEBI in 1992-93, we were looking at a group of people sitting in a single place to do market manipulations. It's not so now. They're spread all over the world. Gone are the days when the market manipulation done through teasing gullible investors through misleading trades and releasing mischievous price signals. The market data is flowing to the participants real time. They are using programming for trading, and designs of market manipulations are constantly changing. That's a problem there. There should be some role for technology in doing all this. How do we see that this technology helps in making this market a very safe and secure place, and surveillance is ahead of, it's not like what Nehul said in the last session, that is police arrives even before the crime happens. That's what actually the whole challenge is. So I would now invite the panelists to speak about all these topics one after the other. To start with, I invite Mr. Ranganath Atreya to see how he is using technology in governance. Mr. Ranganath.
Hi, good evening to everybody, and I hope all our participants are safe and everyone is keeping well. And I hope and pray that the promised vaccines arrive earlier than anticipated, and that's going to be a big factor. And we have all lived through exceedingly challenging times. And when I reflect on my own organization's experience and that of other equally placed organizations, I'm heartened to note that whenever I reach out to my professional colleagues across the landscape of the index stock companies, one fact starkly comes immediately into focus. The innate resilience of both the organizations and individuals to have been able to immediately adapt themselves and immediately switch over into many modes of solutions, which has seen an unprecedented move towards finding solutions in a very, very agile manner. Normally, an organization which would typically employ a consultant and ask the consultant to provide solution, there was no time for it. There was no opportunity for it. They had to find out their own means. They had to find out their own methods to do that over there. And those organizations which were blessed with deep knowledge of technology have adapted exceedingly well, not to kind of try to put up in a more boastful manner. But luckily for us, in our institution, we began the digital journey well ahead of time. And the intention was not to look at any disruption event the way in which we have gone through, but we were well placed because even as early as 2 years ago, we started our own innovation labs. We started integrating a lot of our data into data analytics and data mining, established the protocols internally as well, made people sensitive about how data mining, data analysis forms part of not just exotic research reports, but part of everyday workflows. So much so that this proved to be an exceedingly important investment to make when we went through this pandemic period. So what it resulted in is that we are seamlessly able to quickly move into areas such as KYC, moving into areas such as signature, moving into areas such as processes such as account opening in a very rapid manner. And it is remarkable to see that the business volumes of the organization have, in fact, tripled as the trust and confidence of the public has come pouring in, looking at the confidence with which the bank has been able to transition itself. And all credit goes to the professionals in the organization who are well invested into technology. I think the key learning here, if I can put across, is having a robust internal technology structure is not just a competitive advantage, but is a mandate for survival in the days ahead. It is a mandate for survival in the years ahead. How an organization may thrive or even survive depends upon its capability to deploy technology in the fastest manner possible, keeping in mind the regulatory requirement as well. Because whatever we were able to do, in fact, during this period, we raised a huge capital issue as well. The remarkable thing about that was not a single piece of paper was printed. Nobody applied a signature on a piece of paper. Everything moved into a digital signature mode. And here I must absolutely compliment the Indian regulatory framework, including the Reserve Bank of India and Securities Exchange Board of India, and of course the stock exchanges and depositories. The amount of collaboration that they extended in every manner possible, I think that's one of the remarkable learnings that we must go into. So when we talk about the subject matter of governance, governance is both inside out and outside in. That's very important for us to recognize over there. So you have to look at the inside out perspective of governance as well as the outside in perspective over there. How is a regulator going to accept what you're doing unless and until you engage with the regulator and make them understand that, look, the controls and procedures that you are putting in place and substituting instead of the traditional process is as good enough for them to accept that this is a good enough procedure. I think that is the most important dialogue that I would say is a critical need. And to the credit of our regulators, I would say that we have the best regulators in the world when it comes to the amount of openness, the amount of absorption of technology, the ability to they themselves moved in a very agile fashion. We could not have done many things, in such a short time frame had it not been for their own keen understanding and their ability to assimilate. And we have, I would say that these are models which we should continue to therefore take forward. And the learning has been that the learning first is trust and communicate to the regulators dynamically in an environment like this. That's the first learning over there. Open up and explain what are the challenge points and where are the soft spots. Get their buy-in when you're making a change in your procedures from what would have otherwise normally been a procedure you would have adopted over there. It's not possible for us to go and physically submit a document anymore. We will have to, use a scanned image. And if they say that, look, they need an authentication, then you have to necessarily have it digitally authenticated. So getting your whole framework of both the internal officials of the organization and the external regulatory framework and their officials also aligned over there is one of the most important needs, I would say. And I would say that therefore, these learnings that we have developed over there, we are very happy to collaborate and put them up in a public domain for all to therefore, get the benefit of. If at all the pandemic has taught us something, it has taught us that there's an increased need for us to collaborate in a what I would say symbiotic manner and achieve results which are going to be win-win for everybody. And therefore, it has taught us that we are all mortals, agnostic to your economic status, agnostic to your education, agnostic to your economic status, whatever it is over there. It's a great leveler. So the aspect of humility, the aspect of respect, the aspect of collaboration, I think these are the highlights from a perspective of importance of strengthening the foundations of governance between the entities and the regulators that we must further work upon and cement and strengthen using the learnings out of this period is what I would say. I do not definitely, I never don't, I never want to go back to another manual filing the regulator after this period is over, definitely. So, that would be a, 2 steps backwards. So that's something that we should be wary of, because there is always a temptation to try to adopt, the 1960 model again, because it was once prescribed over there. So I think some of the things that we have moved ahead on, we should move further ahead on and never want to go back. We've had an experience in India where we have all held virtual shareholder meetings. I can say that, the amount of participation that it brought in from all the corners of India and well-regulated companies ran them very well. And the feedback has been exceedingly positive from people who have been able to participate over there. Of course, it has also exposed the network issues, etc., and the need for strengthening that. I think those are important learnings for us when we strengthen our, infrastructure as well. When I talk about governance, unless and until you have robust networks in every part of India, some of the, penetration and the permeation of what you may want to do from a central level may not reach there. So the end mile compliance, as we call it over there, is going to be largely determined by the quality of IT infrastructure at the endpoints. We have run our digital villages, in India. Over 1,000 villages in India are digitized now. I am happy to report that, not a single currency note exchange in those villages. They have all benefited. It is an untold story. It is an unwritten story about how those villages have been the beneficiaries of this digital revolution over there. Everybody sends money digitally. If you get a supply of milk, you pay digitally. This looks unbelievable, but in the smallest villages, the penetration of technology, thanks to the mobile phone device, has been a unique experience for us, basically. So when we talk about governance, governance is not just something that is a topic which is relevant at the boardroom of companies alone. Governance means where the rubber meets the road, where your official is interacting with the endpoint customer. What is the level of understanding? What is the level of customer care? What is the level of ethical behavior that she or he displays towards the customer? That level of penetration is something that we need to really work very hard upon. We have tried our models. We find that in the virtual training methodology that we have done, whenever we ran training programs for our people over there, we find that the virtual way, and we put in some software as well to track how many people are actually active in a session, how many people are actually switched on the main screen and then put it on mute. We saw the keystrokes that they are making. We had deliberate question answer sessions at every segment over there to find out how many people are actually answering the questions. We gave them feedback in a nice way, saying that, look, you didn't participate in segments number 135. We got some honest feedback from people also saying that my wife called me from the kitchen and asked me to wash some vessels, so I had to go. So these were some learnings for us also, basically, about how you cope up with it over there. And of course, these are what you can say the new normals that we need to adapt ourselves to. The way in which you deliver learnings, how you enable culture in an environment where everybody is working from home, how do you bring that sense of communication during this period? It's been a period of a great amount of experiment, but I should say that the learnings are exceedingly heartening, and the amount of adaptation that we see, not just among our employees, our vendors, their employees, the amount of integration that they brought in, the amount of creativity that they brought to the table, our technology partners, our innovation lab, officials over there who were so quick to bring across apps which could, interface with, internal databases. So one of the key things that I would highlight over here from a governance angle and also from a future technology angle is to ask ourselves in very large organizations with large databases as to how well integrated the databases and the data is within the organization. This was one big question that we tried to address 2 years ago, and we tried to build those bridges appropriately. We found it very, very important to deal with during this COVID period, because if you have created islands of data, then the ability for you to have one part of the organization be completely alive to what is happening in another part of that could get compromised. So we have to build a data web internally to the organization, which is visually, I would like to put it across like a spider's web. If you not achieve that objective, if you not achieve that end result over there, then you are at risk of having islands of data which don't talk to each other, and then that may create its own complications and create governance issues over there, like somebody not able to view X percentage of whatever was the repayment of a particular type of product over there, and therefore not being able to mine the credit quality of a particular portfolio. You see, these things are very, very important today in the way in which we work today. So I would put across the view that three things in particular stand out. One is concentrate on your data within the organization. Two, concentrate on how well you are poised to be able to mine your data to achieve outcomes which are useful to you and which serve the purpose of controls and processes, and are able to also cater to the regulatory requirements. Increasingly, all regulatory requirements are going into an online format where you're sharing data with the regulators, where they're asking you to run reports in various forms over there. How well your query systems work, how well and robustly you're able to bring intelligent reports and MIS out of the data that you have got is increasingly going to decide and determine how well you're able to meet regulatory questions which may be asked over there. And those organizations which may be found wanting in being able to corroborate data, fact, and evidence may find them being severely penalized by the regulators. Gone are the days when the regulators are willing to give you any benefit of doubt. They just can't. You just have to have hard evidence in what you're able to bring to the table and show to them. So unless and until you devise a capability over there, part of your risk framework and your risk heat map will lead to the organization having to face challenges from a regulatory impact perspective over there. The amount of regulatory penalties we have seen in the recent past are in the millions, and it is going to create crippling penalties for organizations which do not pay attention to the quality of the data, the robustness in which you are able to evidence a particular transaction over there. So as a friend of mine in a regulatory authority put it across to me, trust is only as good as your last transaction. So I repeat that, trust is only as good as your last transaction. So today, that is how the mood of the regulators is. It doesn't matter if for 20 years you had a superb track record. If your last transaction shows and demonstrates to them that there is a complete abandonment of control, there is a lapse in procedures and systems over there, they are going to come very hard on that entity on account of even a single transaction. Yes, of course, you may want to showcase many things over there, but that is where I think one needs to be exceedingly careful. The risk management of data, while you do that, also we have to understand that the challenges of regulation, such as where, for example, let's take the SEBI's provision of insider trading regulations, the sensitivity of unpublished price sensitive information. How many of us are sensitive about, even within the organization, how sensitive information travels between departments? How many of us have device systems which can track what is being shared between departments. Particularly in a work from home environment over there, it becomes very challenging for us to do monitoring. But how well is the monitoring being done to ensure that there are red flags which are raised if we see patterns which are not looking usual in nature over there? The regulator is, expecting that, even the giver of the information and the seeker of the information should do so with a protocol which is properly regulated over there. But are the systems able to cater to the requirement within the organization? We have tried to do our best to try to address it, but we find that it is a very challenging area, that too in a distributed data environment where people are working from home, where what the laptop and the end user is being connected to and what all are the networks that that person is connected to, it raises a lot of challenges which we must be able to face. And while we are trying to use a technology layer to provide us with the assurance that is required over there, increasingly we see that the threat to information, the risk of information leakage, and the risk of cyber related attacks is the next big threat that we foresee. This is, in my mind, going to be even more severe than what we physically see and what we biologically see as a virus. So the ability of organizations to be able to do predictive analysis and vulnerability analysis on a regular basis, and to be able to test their controls from time to time to assure themselves that, look, even in this type of attack over there, we are well prepared enough to be able to counter this, to be able to quickly restore our systems back to normal over there. I think these are the kind of stress testing scenarios that COVID has placed at our doorstep. So how well is our stress testing being done? Do we need to tweak the level of stress testing that we do? Or is it even relevant to do that stress testing the way we did historically? Is it time for us to look at a different protocol of stress testing and look at network security and cyber security in a different with a different lens? So these are, I think, the questions that COVID has raised. We have tried to find our answers as an institution, and we will continue to keep finding answers, and we will collaborate, learn, and we will try to deal with other institutions in this process of learning over there. But I would say that this is where when we talk about governance over there, so governance by itself is not something that can exist in vacuum. It is a outcome and result of many things that happen. When we talk about a governance outcome, it is the end result. It is the right hand side of the chemical equation. So where the left hand side of the chemical equation is acting in a manner which is uncontrolled, the right hand side of the chemical equation cannot be in a controlled fashion. So controlling the quality of governance on the right hand side is equal to controlling the left hand side of the equation in terms of what inputs go into it, which is a combination of both management thinking, strategic thinking, technology related thinking, risk frameworks, and absolute culture, which is a bedrock for what we need to do, particularly when we are exposed to public and where we are dealing with shareholders at large over there. So one of the key things that has come out when we look at the COVID period is the explosion in the number of investors. At least we see that in India, and investors have just, the numbers have just gone up. So now, what is it that the control framework should be able to analyze and do predictive analysis on the basis of this? Is it that we did a demographic profile of many of these new investors? They are just kids, 20, 21-year-old, who are now motivated to do trades, build an income. So these are what is the profile of risk, therefore, that is there inherently over here? How is it that you are going to be able to regulate effectively and not create a market crisis event? Because many of them are just trading the we don't know whether they are trading with the absolute knowledge of the risks that they are undertaking and the inherent risks in the system, or whether they are just they're very young. We saw a demographic cut profile. I was quite stunned to see the number of people. So these aspects are something as well that we need to properly address. I thought I'll give you this thought of mine, and then we could then take it up as the panelists want to provide their expert inputs as well. Thank you, Dr. Narasimhan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ranganath. You have given your experiences and how you are using technology as a governance tool and also aptly describe the challenges that you are foreseeing in the governance area, which is not necessarily only boardroom level, it's across the customer satisfaction, stakeholder satisfaction, and so on and so forth. Now I turn to Mr. Michael to start his initial remarks, please. Mr. Michael.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for the opportunity to talk today. I think from a trade surveillance perspective, NASDAQ trade surveillance, at one stage it was called SMARTS. We've been doing trade surveillance as a trade surveillance focused application since around about 2004 for banks and broker dealers. And before that, we were running trade surveillance for exchanges and regulators. So we cover the whole financial environment, from regulators, exchanges, through to all the banks and brokers in terms of providing that trade surveillance technology. And we've observed since 2004 some very significant changes, and particularly changes that have been led by technology in the way that market manipulation is done, and the risks that market manipulation pose not only to the market, and it's a two-sided thing. The market manipulation, first of all, has the impact of reducing perceptions of the integrity of the market, and markets being seen as fair or not fair, and that's and no exchange or market can afford to have for there to be a perception that the market is not fair and treats particular investors more equally or more fairly than others. There's that side of it, but equally, and I think that we've all observed over particularly the last 5 years, that the regulatory consequences and the financial consequences to a bank or a broker of their traders or their accounts doing the wrong thing can be significant. We have seen multiple $1 million fines, particularly over the last few years for things like spoofing. So the intensity and the focus on market manipulation and the consequences have really significantly increased over recent years. One of the big changes, and it was a game changer in many ways, was the advent of algorithmic trading. The ability for machines to trade. When we commenced SMARTS, NASDAQ Trade Surveillance, back in 2004, there was no such thing. Or at least it was in its very early stages. Orders were predominantly manually entered by a human, and that naturally reduced or put a cap on your ability to manipulate, because you were effectively limited by a human's ability to type orders into an interface and get those orders into a market. Now, obviously, when algorithms and became much more prevalent, which was probably around I'd say 10 to 12 years ago, when we started seeing these coming much more into focus in the banks. Immediately that increased the capacity for manipulation, because what it delivers is speed. And if you're thinking about many of the manipulation types, particularly if you're looking at sort of ramping type manipulations, and particularly spoofing. And so many of you may have heard of this type of manipulation called spoofing or layering, and which is all about putting orders into the order book, typically within a very short period of time, to send misleading signals. So that if you're actually a seller, you may sort of put a significant pressure on the order book on the bid side in order to send misleading signals to the market, so that you can take advantage of that and trade on the other side. And the advent of technology and the advent of speed have substantially increased the ability for a person who wants to do the wrong thing to do that, because they can now literally push thousands of orders a second, not only into a single market, they can be doing this across markets. So many of the manipulations we see are across venues where a security or a futures contract might be listed in multiple locations, or maybe the contracts are related, or maybe they're derivatives of each other. So previously that would have been physically impossible for a human to be sort of manually putting orders because time is of the essence. But now with the ability for the algorithm, for the machine to be pushing orders out at that rate, the complexity of manipulation has increased substantially, and we are seeing the effect of that in some of the more well-known spoofing cases recently. If you think about insider trading, which I guess is probably the most well-known form of market abuse, think about how information is disseminated now. When we were starting NASDAQ trade surveillance, when it was smarts, really there was only one, there was obviously the internet, and there were chat sites and so on, but essentially news, corporate news, there was effectively one channel by which that was disseminated, and typically it was down, that came from the company down through the news wire, got picked up by news agencies, then maybe got picked up by a number of websites. But think now around how information is disseminated, and typically that information is not going through the formal channels. We're seeing information around companies, corporate releases coming out on social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook. So the ability to control information, particularly price-sensitive information, is much more difficult. So from a regulator's point of view, and from a bank's point of view, where they're trying to monitor for potential insider trading, if they're trying to monitor internally for front running, there's with banks and brokers, you have information, price sensitive information, often coming into your business, because of corporate actions that you may be involved in. So how do you control that information when there are so many channels around, whether it be social media, whether it be instant messaging, all of the different electronic communications and video channels? So how do you control that information, and how do you detect then when someone is taking advantage of that information, maybe abusing their position with access to that information internally and trading to profit on that? So this surge in different technologies over the last, I would say particularly over the last 5 to 10 years, one has made market abuse much more, different forms of market abuse much more easier to perpetrate. But then I think the flip side, what goes with that is that, as that technology has increased, the technology to find it and detect it via trade surveillance systems such as NASDAQ trade surveillance has also become very advanced. And it's no coincidence that, over the last 5 years, we are seeing regulators pursue prosecutions of very sophisticated types of spoofing, and often, getting to that point of being able to prosecute within a very short period of time. I remember when going back to, say, the early 2000s, often it would take regulators, something would happen and they wouldn't get it in front of the courts to 6 or 7 or 8 years later. And often, when that happens, it loses its impact because it's, it happened so long ago. But what we're seeing now is regulators are getting things to the courts much more quickly. They're able to discover and explain very sophisticated forms of manipulation. And the reason they're able to do that is because they also have this new technology. They have technology such like the one that NASDAQ provides, which can look at trading and using different algorithms, different alerts, different ways to visualize the data, you can uncover these patterns, because every type of manipulation leaves what we call its signature. There's a signature of spoofing that you can identify, that you can visualize. So I think it's always a two-sided thing. Sure, technology has made it, given more opportunities for people who want to do the wrong thing to do market abuse, but the flip side is technology also puts the tools in your hands, if you work in surveillance or compliance, to find those things and to protect your firm, your bank, your brokerage from the regulatory and financial risks that might come from that. I think so as you know, so with the regulators, they've got much better technology in their hands, and I think the regulators are taking a more collaborative approach with the market, but certainly they're exercising a lot more focus and scrutiny. I think they're more willing to give some guidance as to what banks and brokers and participants need to be monitoring and what to look for. So whereas going back 10, 20 years, maybe regulators didn't come out so much to give that guidance about what to look for. So I think we are seeing that much more in different geographies and different jurisdictions. And I think the regulators are opening their eyes and their minds too to the new technologies that are available to detect market abuse. So when you look at things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, we are definitely, whilst there are, I guess, some reservations around how you can keep tabs and how you can keep an auditable, track of what the machine is identifying and what it's not identifying, and how you can make it verifiable and auditable, the decisions that the machine is making when you're looking at an artificial intelligence. I think many regulators are seeing it as inevitable that the place of detecting market abuse is inevitably going to involve machine learning and artificial intelligence, and they're now understanding that, and they're sort of acknowledging that, but they're wanting to make sure that as we go down that road, that there are the checks and balances in place to make sure that that the machine is accountable, and that the firm using that AI is accountable as to the decisions that are being made by the artificial intelligence or the machine learning type technology. So that's a really interesting approach, and I think we're also seeing the use of sort of deep analytics. We're increasingly seeing the use of behavioral science, particularly in the case of NASDAQ trade surveillance, where we have a number of behavioral scientists within our business, and that's all about trying to understand how people make decisions, and how people make decisions in particular environments. How do they make a decision to inside a trade? What are the signals that they leave behind? What are the behaviors, and so on? So we can track those, and particularly because of trading technology, we capture every keystroke. So we can create a very rich profile of trading behavior. How does a trader normally trade? What do they normally trade? Are they normally aggressive? Are they normally passive? How many times do they cancel orders? What asset classes do they trade? And so once you create a profile of what's normal using that type of behavioral analytics, then you can start to identify where that behavior changes. Okay, so normally they're very passive, but now they're crossing the book. They're sort of bidding through the offer. Normally they don't cancel orders. Now 95% of their orders are being sort of canceled before trading. So those types of behavioral signals are really powerful and really useful in the detection phase that is at the core of surveillance, and it's very much why NASDAQ is looking at how we've got a package of 70 to 80 different alerts which cover all types of different market abuses and so on, but and they're at the core of what we do, but we are looking at how can we use AI, how can we use behavioral analytics and behavioral sciences as another way to identify where someone may be doing the wrong thing. So I think, just conscious of time. So I think, there's some of the key changes, and probably the other big one is around OTC trading. And I think probably the focus of trade surveillance, the focus of regulators for many years has been on exchange traded equities, futures, options, and so on. And the OTC market, fixed income, FX, was always left off to the side and wasn't often subject to the same regulatory oversight. But that's the other big change, is that over the last few years, one, the regulators are very much focusing on OTC. We've seen some extremely big fines for manipulation of LIBOR rates and FX rates. And with the advent of trading technology, we're now seeing more and more volume moving onto trading platforms, moving onto electronic trading platforms, because they're becoming more prolific, they're cheaper to run. And regulators are saying, we want that transparency. We want OTC products to be traded on a order books where everything's disclosed, where there's transparency. So we're seeing that shift too in how OTC instruments are traded. There's some more volume going across to platforms. There's still the core of the market still will be traded bilateral, phone, OTC, and the ability to monitor that is a really important requirement, and it has its own sort of technical challenges in terms of how you monitor OTC. Obviously, it's very different from monitoring on exchange, and that's been a very big focus for NASDAQ around how can we identify these manipulations going on across products in swaps, fixed income, and FX. So I'll stop there. They're the main changes and challenges that we've observed over the last 10 to 15 years.
Thank you, Mr. Michael, for your very insightful observations on how the trade surveillance challenges have been changing over a period of time, right? I mean, it's a very balanced way of suggesting how technology is helping the manipulator and the regulator too at the same time, and how regulator has caught up with the technology and is able to use. Very interesting to observe that along with technology, even your need for behavioral scientists is also increasing. That's a very interesting observation probably we have to see. And your observation on the need for doing surveillance on the OTC trades, again, is very interesting. While it may not be directly applicable to India at this point in time, but I think it's a very good way forward probably for expanding horizons to the regulator. Now I turn to Mr. Sunil Kadam, who is the regulator himself, to say a few initial remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Narasimhan. First of all, I should thank Dr. Muralidharan for accepting our invitation and conducting this event together. And both Dr. Narasimhan and Dr. Muralidharan have worked hard and designed this program. It has come out quite well, and I'm sure it will be a successful event today. So coming to today's discussion on surveillance, as a capital market regulator, we have a broader three mandate, that is regulation, development, and protection. So many times people say, how do we achieve both the mandates together? How can regulation can be done at the same time development also can be done? But what we believe over the year is that if you have a good regulations and if you have a well-regulated market, the market will automatically develop, and the development will be it's a part of good regulations. And good regulations can be, it's not a job of only a regulator, it's a job of all the intermediaries, all the market participants. And therefore there are expectations that regulations, while regulator is doing their job as a regulator, there is a need to do lot more regulations by the intermediaries also. So now what we say that regulations, there are multiple ways we do regulate. So today's focus of regulation, which are focusing is on the secondary market operations basically. So these secondary market operations, all of us we believe that if you want to protect the interests of the investors, they need to be participating in our secondary market. The market needs to work in an orderly manner. Now, when you talk about the orderly manner, we say, what is orderly? Is it flat market? No, it's not flat market. It should move based on the demand and supply situation. So market goes up if the positive news comes, people demand goes up, prices go up. same way it goes downward if the negative news comes. So these are the normal market behavior, and it should run in that manner. But many times we observe that market doesn't behave in that manner. Some artificial demand and supply is created. There are different ways people try to create artificial demand and supply. There are demand and supply which creates outside the market. There are demand and supply created within the market. So we are focusing on the demand and supply situation within the market. So lot many trades happen on the exchanges. They themselves create another inducing practices so that investors come to trade in that market, or they buy or sell based on those induced trades actually. So those are the areas where the surveillance is the key activity which regulators carries out. So as a surveillance activity, SEBI is doing it since quite a long time. In fact, the background is that when the 2001 major crisis happened in Calcutta Stock Exchanges, and that exchange in fact collapsed, and then Joint Parliamentary Committee was set up, which has mandated that we can't depend externally on the exchanges. As a regulator, you also need to have some system of monitoring. Then as a regulator, then we thought over it, we did a lot of research. And in those days, technology was new, and not many products were available, but still I think the smarts product was available at that point of time. And then India adopted that product. And initially we started surveillance with that product from 2006 onwards. And over the period, we found that the smart product is good, but it has got some limitations. So it doesn't have the features of pattern analysis and other analysis. So therefore, we have gone further and develop our own in-house product that is data warehousing and business intelligence product. So DWBIS. So this system we have developed with the help of local software developer, and this system has the capacity to do lot many analysis, pattern analysis at the script level, at the broker level, at the client level also. And with this analysis, we are able to collect the evidences. The evidences are important because isolation trades, if you go to the court of law and say this is a manipulation, that doesn't work there. So we need to have a lot of pattern analysis, and this software helps us to do a lot of pattern analysis, and we come to some conclusion and evidences to show the court that there is a case and we need to go further in this matter. So that is one what we are doing as a regulator. But beside that, stock exchanges as a first level regulator are also doing lot many surveillance activities. As a regulator, we look at the overall market of multiple exchanges, multiple clients, dealing with multiple brokers. But exchanges level, they deal with their own exchanges and their own trading platform. Their role basically focus more on the risk management as well as surveillance also. So they are doing their good job. But over the period, what we felt is that what exchanges, what regulators doing may not be adequate. There is a need to have more surveillance activity at the entry level. That is the intermediary level. So intermediaries also need to develop their surveillance capacity. Now, a few years back, we had visited the regulators of Singapore and Hong Kong exchanges. So those exchanges, there the market structure is slightly different than India because there are big brokers are there and institution clients are there. So these brokers themselves have lot of surveillance activities, which in fact regulators doesn't do it. And the surveillance responsibility is more at the intermediary level than at the regulator level. So that is a different learning from us we found. If the surveillance system is developed at the intermediary level, at the entry level, there would be lot of filtering will happen and the market cleanliness will happen. So what we expect is that going forward, the intermediaries should develop their product. As in earlier panel, we have seen in India, technology is not that difficulty. And with the help of technology, they need to filter a lot many activities which their clients are doing and see that the market is fair and transparent. With the help of the intermediaries surveillance, with the help of exchange surveillance, and overall the monitoring of the regulators, I hope the market systems will further improve. It's not possible that we avoid all the manipulations. But still, yeah, we will have a better equipped to deal with all the manipulations and deal with those systems. So my thought for today is that basically we need to encourage intermediaries to develop their surveillance activity, use more of technology. Obviously, in Indian markets also, the number of transactions volumes are going up substantially, and it's not possible to manually do the surveillance activity. So they need to use the technology. Technology is available, like Smart's product, which was earlier providing softwares to various intermediaries across the globe, is now, I think, is taken over by NASD, and I think NASD is also providing software for the broker level surveillances. So that is one supplier, but there could be many supplier. In India, in technology, we don't have dearth of technology suppliers actually. So it's not that difficult for us to adopt new surveillance method and go for the surveillance activities at the intermediary level. So basically, this is what my initial thought for today's discussion, and we can discuss further as we go further.
Thank you, Mr. Sunil. I think you brought out the regulator's dilemma between regulation and development, and the way you said that better regulation will automatically contribute to development is a lovely idea. And another important point that you made is about the surveillance at the entry level. Surveillance at the entry level, I think, is a very important point to be noted. We hope that technology will strengthen the hands of the brokers to be able to do the surveillance at the interest level. I have a few questions for the audience. I would like to ask one question to Mr. Michael. What it says is that you mentioned about some 70, 80 alerts. Is there any way in which we can understand what could be these alerts? Is a question to you from audience. Can you please answer this?
Yeah, sure. So the question is, what are the form of those alerts? Is that right? Like what?
Can we read something about those 70, 80? Is there a link where we can read the?
Yes, certainly we can. For anyone who is interested, we can follow up and provide them with documentation of the types of scenarios that we cover, the types of alerts. Yeah, that we can certainly do that.
Yeah, probably we will come back to you and request you on a mail offline. Yeah. One more question that comes to you is that can you throw some light on how capital market products and technology are evolving and how technology can help market participants manage the associated regulatory risk? If you can be brief because of the interesting time, please.
Yeah, so I think a well-targeted detection program, surveillance program, which focuses on the key risk. And the first thing you need to do is to understand your business and the type of trading, because certain risks may apply to certain types of business and certain types of trading. Other business types, it's a different type of risk. So you need to understand your business, and from that, what are the trading risks and the regulatory risks that are posed to you, and then to put in place not only the surveillance technology and the alerts, but very importantly, regulators expect to see good processes internally around how you monitor those alerts, how you look into them, how you set your alert parameters. So more and more regulators are expecting to see that you are applying sound decisions, and you have good processes to not only receive alert, but then to follow it through, to examine it, to investigate it, and to refer it on if it gets to a particular escalation point.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Michael. Now I'll turn to Mr. Ranganath. Can you speak about the specific tools that you're using in your governance, technology tools that you're using in your governance? Kindly be brief because director are already there for next speaking. Yeah.
So most of the technology tools that we have developed in the bank is a result of our having our own tech lab which has been attached with the bank. So we have now possibly evolved into a technology company which incidentally does banking. Is how I would portray.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
We are a technology company which accidentally is into banking. So what has our own journey has taught us that evolving your own technology tools by building your own code gives you a great deal of comfort, and most of the software that we have deployed is proprietary in nature. What we have done is that we have not tried to build a huge IT company. We have tried to find out from the immediate marketplace collaborators who would work with us. So I think that is the evolving model. So as a large ship of a bank, it is impossible for us to be as agile as a sports car. So rather than try to build another racing track, etc., etc., we quickly get on the guy who's a Michael Schumacher equivalent over there, who is able to bring that learning and collaborate with our teams and bring his own 3-4 guys. We've created the enabling framework in our idea lab to build such structures, and that's our great learning, that the ability to turn agile is critical for us. So most of the solutions we've developed are actually in-house. We've realized that they work very well, and they are quite let's say intuitive in nature. And once you own the code, making changes over there becomes very easy for you. Otherwise, you are at the mercy of the software provider, who normally charges a usurious fee for any change and whatever. We've realized over the period of years that yes, the initial hard work is to be done, but in the long run, it gives you the flexibility and the comfort to scale and build your model the way you want to. That's our learning, sir.
Excellent, excellent. I mean, ICICI Bank also is doing banking, and it's more a technology company. It's a very interesting observation. And agility is built through collaborative efforts is again important lesson to learn in this process. Mr. Sunil, if we can briefly spend a minute or two in how technology can help in preventing market manipulation. Of course, detection post manipulation is one part, but how can you help prevent manipulations in the market? I think that you could throw some light on that, please.
Yes, actually, I'll not give detail, but one specific instance I will give. Earlier, as a capital market regulator, there were requirement कि every insider trading and SST regulation, every change in the shareholding beyond certain prescribed limit, you need to disclosed to the market and stock exchanges. So this was quite a problem for us, because lot many failures used to happen, and violations used to happen, and we used to take lot many adjudication initial actions on all these violations. So we have realized that is not a fair thing to do it, because we have lot of data, we have use of technology. Why don't you generate report based on the system and displays in the market? Ultimately, what the investor want, or any informed investor want, is the information to deal in the securities market. So if that information is available, why do you mandate the individuals and corporates or directors to disclose that information? So thus, this is a way to basically use technology and prevent the violations happen, rather than information is disclosed to the market. And then similarly, in the intermediaries or brokers level also, they can have lot many alerts within themselves. So any high alerts, any pattern, if they quickly contact their clients and ask the questions, probably these things which are percolated into violations can be stopped. Basically, there are a lot many things the broker level also can be done.
The key takeaway I see from the talk that all the three experts have said, Ranganath was talking about collaborative approach, Mr. Michael was talking about collaborative approach, and Mr. Sunilkaran was also talking about collaboration between regulator and the broker using technology. The bridge is an excellent takeaway for us. I had a very interesting and a very educative session with you all the people. On behalf of NISM and NSC, I thank each of the panel members for taking their time and sparing their time. Special thanks to Mr. Michael, because I think it's fairly deep into the night, or 11 o'clock. And thanks for sparing your time and sparing your efforts for this. Ranganath, I mean, I'm grateful to you, because one request, I think you have obliged, and if you have come onto the dais to speak of sharing our thoughts about how to use technology in governance. And Mr. Sunil, of course, is my colleague and has been helpful in designing this and executing this seminar. Thank you very much. Thanks once and all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hand over to Sheila.
I will only
I will take over.
quick line to it, Dr. Narasimhan, by saying that we should all transform ourselves into learning organizations. The minute we do that, I think that is the most important ask of the hour, to transform ourselves into learning organizations. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And stay safe, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Narasimhan. Thank you all the panel members for your wonderful views on expanding the horizon of markets, risk and surveillance. Thank you so much.